Hello everyone. This is Blue Fingered Donna. I've been playing in blue spritz and dyes and all that kind of good stuff. But never mind that. I am here with you to show you the journal. And it has come quite a ways. And I think I'm going to have to call it stops because it is quite large. Let me pause and get a measuring tape. Okay, I'm back, and let's measure. Let's see here. From the bottom, oh, it helps start at the right end, doesn't it? It's about, let's measure it around. Let's do that. We'll bring it on around, and it is 17 inches round. Oh my goodness. 17 inches. Look at that. 17 inches. My goodness. Actually 17 and a quarter inches round. Or about 6 inches. And let's see, it is about 8.5 inches tall by, well, it's kind of hard to measure it across, but it's about 5 to 6 inches across. The spine, it's got 5 signatures. I'm going to say it's about 3.5 inches. So, it's quite big. Quite large, as you can see. So let's get started. We have this beautiful heart that I made out of some of the different fabrics that we used in our cover. Just different textures and snippets of fabric cut into heart shapes. A little doily there, a button, a little flower that I cut out, and a little doily. And it has several buttons. It's closed with some beautiful lace that ties closed. On the binding, we have a little bow applique. We have 1, 2, 3 doilies. We have vintage lace going down. And the cover itself, if you haven't seen the video, is made from vintage fabrics and vintage print fabrics. A vintage napkin with hand crocheted lace going around it in pink. And it is just, I've sewed some different little buttons for interest. Let's untie it and take a look inside. So there's the ribbon we tie it closed with. So here you can see better the fabrics, the printed fabrics, the vintage fabrics. This is what it looks like from the top. And like I said, it is quite large. It has 5 signatures. This is the bottom. I sewed a little button there for interest. This is what it looks like when it's untied from the front. Now let's get started. It opens. Oh, that fell out when I flipped it upside down. I'm sorry. You can see all the beautiful hand stitching that I've done. And you can see it on the cover too. All the beautiful, beautiful hand stitching. And I've stamped the word love with some flowers there. And I've included a little memo book that I have decorated. And we'll put that back down in there. Here we have a little paper clip. This one, I do not remember who sent it to me. It was sent to me. It was gifted. And I used it to clip a bookmark because the journal is so big. I decided to include a bookmark. And I have stamped and inked around the edges. And there's lace and different cuts on there. And this is a beautiful, beautiful little paper clip. And it just went so perfect with this book. So as much as I hated to part with it, it just seemed like it was meant to be with this book. So I included it. And here we have a pocket, and with this beautiful print and some journal space. And this is one of my little pockets. We have a little flip up with a hummingbird. Place the journal, and that goes in that pocket. We have some vintage. It says one Yankee peddler who was honest but poor, and it's just a vintage book page that I have made into a little pocket, several pockets there, and placed all this ephemera in. I mean, it has several pockets, as you can see. And I included this inside of it because I like the way it looked. And then I put this into this little Beauty is Everywhere into this back place here. It's a little tuck back there. Live in the Moment, and I've included that back here. A little journal card, which I have included here. Nest and Eggs, which I have included here. I think that went into here with that. Some more journal paper. I'll put that down in there. I think that went up here. Nope, maybe it went here. Passionate About Life. That goes in there. Carefree Spirit. And that goes in there. And this just fits right down in this little pocket. And then we have some vintage lace. Some of my artwork. And I've stitched a little button here for interest. Some vintage lace along the edging here, and it has been cut with one of my little punches. You have journal space here, fabric, some tea-dyed graph paper for journaling, vintage lace, some vintage stationery, and a little coin that I made and attached, and it can flip up for journaling there, or you can journal on the back, kind of a little secret place, and you can journal here. Vintage lace, a vintage book page, another little paper clip that I received in a swap, a little a little journal card, and it has a little tuck spot here where you can put something if you'd like. And I just put that down over this little page, slid the little paper clip on, like so. Another vintage book page from a plant book. Some beautiful fabric here. Vintage lace. More beautiful vintage fabric here. A vintage book page. The book that I used for this one was The Dowry. It has been tea-dyed blue. Some vintage fabric. The signature was sewn in here. The other side of the vintage fabric. The other side of that vintage book page. There's some vintage trim here. Vintage lace. a vintage book page, and the book pages that I used are from a 1950s plant book and a 1930 something book and a 1940 something book, I believe. The other side of that, the macrame book, and it was 1950 something, I think. Lace. I stamped Laugh Together. The other side of the vintage stationery. Vintage fabric. Here we have the other side of the tea-dyed graph paper, and I've included a little tag that I've made and stitched around with a little flower at the bottom. And this is the back side where you can journal on it. A little journal card I made with some little artwork that I did, and you can journal on that. A ledger sheet from a vintage ledger. And all of that goes into that little lace pocket that I made with vintage lace. Me and You, I stamped. Here I stamped Always on some fabric and made a pocket, and then on the other side I stamped Together. So Me and You, Always Together. Here, just a little card that I received, recipe card that I received, and it goes into here in this pocket. And I've done some stitching and added some yellow rickrack and some yellow ribbon lace. Here I've included a little journal card I made with some music paper. It says, comfort, give, and love, and strength must come from you. Okay, and it's blank on the back where you can journal. And a guest check that I have decorated. And they go into this little pocket. And I have stitched around the word Together, and then I sewed the pocket on with an embroidery stitch. Here we have a flip out for journaling, and I did use Glimmer Mist, so I don't know if it's picking it up or not, but there is quite a bit of glitter. There, you can see it on this side, I think. Yeah. So there is some sheen to it, some glimmer. Okay, move that. The other side of that, some vintage lace, an embellishment, a flip out, a pocket with a little card that I received. I do not, or I picked up somewhere, I don't remember, to be honest with you, but it looks nice in here, so I put it in. Okay, and I have tea-dyed this also. And that's the end of the first signature. This is signature 2, and I have tea-dyed this paper. It was a paper that I printed out on the computer. I do not remember the name of the website that I printed it from, but you can go to Pinterest and find it. When I tea-dyed it, it made the image slightly come through where you can see the roses through the paper, and I just thought that was awesome. And that's a little flip out, some journal space, and a receipt that I've tucked in there, some lace, a pocket that I've made from a vintage seed packet that I've inked around and added lace to, and then inside of it I have one of my little machine sewn pockets that I do out of vintage book pages, and inside I've added a little piece of, let's see, my hands won't work, paper to journal on. Has little hummingbirds and flowers, and it goes right down in there, and that slides down, let's see, yeah, slides down into here, but it has 1, 2, 3 little spots where you can put things. I couldn't fill everything up because the book was just so large. Okay, here, and I'm going to go back and fix this in a minute with my glue gun. But we have a little envelope and it says genuine time after time, little vintage decoration and paper, little vintage there, a little tuck spot here, and inside, see if I can get it out. I have a little journal page in there, place it private journaling or write a note or something like that. Get it back down in there. Some lace, a vintage printout, okay, and I tea-dyed that paper as well and added some vintage lace. In the back you can see again the image came through, and I have vintage lace here, vintage lace here, some embroidery, hand embroidery, and I embroidered around the edges of the pocket, and then, you know, as I sewed it on, I think I glued the pocket on after I stitched around it. That's what I did. I have included a little journal card for journaling in, private journaling, a little tag, and a little couple of pieces of little paper that I have embellished, and that goes in there. And again, this page has been tea-dyed blue, and it is from a 1940 something book, The Dowry. Here we have some vintage fabric, and I have used embroidery stitching around when I sewed this little pocket on, where I stamped love on this little linen fabric. And you can see the beautiful print of that linen, of that vintage fabric. And here I made a hand sewed tag. I stamped always, so it says love always. And then I embroidered the word love on it, added some rickrack, and did some stitching around the whole thing, and sewed some little lace and a little strip of this vintage fabric on it, and stitched a little bow here to match the word love. And that goes down inside of there. Here we have a little private journaling space, and this is where the signature is sewn in, and this just ties closed to keep that private. Let's see. Okay. Here I've sewed a button with some embroidery thread and just left the tails long and tied it into a bow. And I made a little belly band out of some vintage fabric, and this is vintage fabric as well, and embellished it with a little flower that I cut out, a little mini doily, and another button, and some rickrack, and I did some stitching with some embroidery thread. And then here we have, let me untie it. Let's see here. If I can get it untied, I did it myself, and now I can't untie it. There we go. Okay, just a little raggedy strip of a doily, and I have some coffee dyed paper with a heart on it, a little hole burned there. That's which I have folded up. Still smells of coffee even after all this time. And it just folds over and goes like that. And then we have a little envelope with a private journal card in it, and that goes there. And then we have this little note card if you want to send someone a note, and that goes there. Let's turn it this way. And this just ties together. And slides right inside of there. And then we have another page from that book, The Dowry, and some vintage fabric, pink lace, a printout from the computer, some music, and it says, "Where are you going to, my pretty maid?" It's the other side of the little printout earlier, and that is tea dyed. We have some lace, some green paper with vintage lace, and all the pages have been that have the special beautiful trimming around on all three sides. And some more lace. The other side of that beautiful printout that I did, that page with all the roses, and tea dyed. And on this side, and you can see where the flowers came through. You can really see this rose. It's beautiful. And I added some yellow rickrack and some beautiful coral colored ribbon trim, and added an embellishment, and that's the end of that. I think that's the second, yeah, that's the end of signature 2. And I sewed a little button down here at the bottom and left a few threads dangling. I added an embellishment here to pull the colors from here to this side to draw the eye. And here we have a pocket on this side, and inside of it we have a coffee dyed index card that goes down in there. We have a coffee dyed journal card with angels or cupids or whatever you want to call them. And it goes down in there. Another little tag with some coffee dyed paper and a yellow rose and some music paper. And another little journal card that I made on some coffee dyed paper with some vintage prints. And we have some vintage sheer fabric, some children's lined paper, a page from a vintage playbook from the 1930s, has Shakes and Macbeth in it. Here we have some vintage lace, a pocket with a little tiny postcard in it, a vintage collar with a little snippet of vintage fabric, a little snippet of vintage lace, and some embroidery thread, tied it into a bow. I stamped the word friend, and we have some vintage lace here. And again, the paper has been trimmed all the way around, and that page is yellow, which pulls from the yellow here. Here we have some lace. Back in those days, they had the plants that they had were like lilac bushes and those kind of bushes, and this came from that vintage plant book. And I made a pocket. I stamped on some fabric. This one has Laugh, and I glued that together and make a pocket, and in it you have a 2019 little calendar and a little mini journal with lots of little papers in there for making notes or journaling, or whatever you need to do there, making lists or whatever. So you have a calendar included. Here I cut out a flower. I added some vintage lace, more vintage lace, and more vintage lace, and also the flower, and added a vintage recipe card inside. So that's a tuck spot. We have a ledger page with some vintage embroidery snippets on there. We have some chevron print fabric with a little doily. I stamped friend onto a little piece of fabric, added some of that vintage snippet of embroidery, added this little printout, and again, I'm sorry, it's been a while since I printed these out, but you can find them on Pinterest. And I tucked that down in there. And this is just a little Bible verse that I've tucked in there. It says, "When I can't, God can." And the other side of that fabric, this is just a little page from a pronunciation little book. I've embellished it with a little doily. Here we have a receipt with more appliques, some lace, and this is a wholesale receipt from when I had my store. It says Anything and Everything Wholesale is the name of it, and it has the address and the phone numbers. You can order from them. They're from Texas. Some lace, several pages of a memo pad with the little beautiful flowers that I've tucked inside this little tuck spot. And this little tuck spot is made of vintage fabric, vintage sheer with embroidery, this beautiful ribbon trim, a little doily, and a button, and it is sewed on with embroidery thread, and there's a button on the back side as well. And this is some of my beautiful artwork of a flower, vintage lace, a tea-dyed doily. This is where this third signature is sewed in. The other side of the artwork, and it is light, so you can write on it. More journal space, lace, the other side of that receipt, the other side of the pronunciation page. Here we have a pocket made of some vintage lace and a doily and a button that I've sewed on, and some vintage stationery. I don't know if y'all remember, this is the kind of stationery that we used a lot when we were little girls. And it folded, and it came with a little gold seal that you just put on there, sticker thing. And it was, the pocket was hand stitched on. A page from that, the other side of the lilac bush from that 1930s or 50s plant book. Lace. Here we have a fold out with a little pocket made from a little doily, a couple of little a little memo thing with like, I don't know, some green paper, and another one of those little cards, and some stamping and some glimmer mist. Journal space, vintage lace, the other side of that vintage page from the Book of Plays from the 1930s, and it does have a natural patina to it. The other side of the children's writing tablet page, vintage fabric. This I left as a tuck spot, and I stamped love, and in it I have this beautiful piece of stationery with friendship and an inspirational little verse on there. A little page of tea-dyed paper with a little embellishment here. And I like the way it looked, ripped like that. That's just me. A little memo page with a little teapot and teacup, and I put that in there. And a little tag that I made using my sewing machine and an envelope with the cellophane and one of my die-cut flowers flipped up at the bottom. And you can journal on the back, and it has a little piece of ribbon at the top. Isn't that just cute? I just love those little kitty cats. They're so adorable. Okay, and that's the end of the third signature, and we're into the fourth signature now. And I stamped the word laugh and glued on a white butterfly applique. And the paper has been tea dyed, and it does have a print from a platter that I used. Beautiful, beautiful coloring came out on that. A small journal place on some yellow polka dotted paper, some lace, a page from a vintage book from the 1930s with flowers, some glimmer mist sprayed blue, no, it's purple and pink paper, and it does have like a very light sheen to it, glimmer mist. and some yellow lace. A beautiful tea-dyed print of some vintage toil paper print, copy paper. Some dusky rose vintage lace. A very old vintage page from a hymnal, and look at the beautiful patina of that. That is just naturally aged. And it says "Me and You Together." And I have stamped on this side a little border here and some flowers there. This is a page from a Spanish book, Learning to Speak Spanish, and I've stamped love on there and love on this side as well. This is some script paper, learning to write script from the old times when they used a little inkwell. And this is a vintage page from that kit. And this is a stamp. Has a flip out and some beautiful glimmer mist dyed paper there. And it does have a little glittery sheen to it. I don't know if you can see it or not, but a tea-dyed index card. And some fabric, sheer fabric, a little flip up, and I've stamped on it. This is vintage statement paper that from back when they did the statements on that green and white lined paper, and it has been tea dyed with pink, and I used a platter and it picked up the print. Beautiful, beautiful coloring. Some vintage green sheer fabric, or teal, or whatever you want to call it. Some beautiful teal colored paper, and I've stamped friend on it. Some artwork that I did with flowers. It's beautiful, beautiful colors. I love those colors. And here we have another pocket where I've stamped grin on some fabric and slow stitched it on to some vintage fabric. And in it we have a little card with a hummingbird and a little bug and some flowers, and it is just a journal card, and I put that down in there, and a little bag full of goodies, just some little goodies for fun. This is a card that I made into a journal card with some fabric and machine sewed around it, and sewed a little ticket onto there. Just a little, with God all things are possible, place to make a list. Long sheet of paper for making a list or something if you need to. And a cute little tag to journal on. And that all goes down into here in this beautiful little handmade bag that I made. And that fits down into there. And again, it's that beautiful vintage fabric. Here we have some lined paper, some vintage eyelet lace, journaling space for planning. It has the date and lined paper, pink and white lines. And this is a vintage page from that plant book. Some more beautiful lace. And this is where the, let's see, fourth signature is tied in. Look at this beautiful lace. Isn't that gorgeous? Another journal place I have made. Vintage book page from a plant book. Vintage iris eyelet lace. Lined paper. Vintage fabric with flowers on it. Just beautiful. The other side of my artwork. Some vintage sheer fabric. I love the colors. Some, the other side of that pink tea-dyed, green-lined statement paper, vintage statement paper. Some more sheer fabric. Another little flip out with a little memo that I've made with several pieces of beautiful lined paper to right there. The other side of that Spanish speaking page. The other side of that hymnal And the music is What a Friend We Have in Jesus, Blessed Assurance, Dusky Rose Vintage Lace, the other side of that tulle that I tea-dyed copy paper, the other side of that vintage book from the 1930s, I think it was 39, lace, polka dot, a small little journal space there, some more tea-dyed paper, and I love the way that came out. A little paper clip, and we're going into the fifth signature now. And we have a little paper clip up here that I made, a little guest list, another little journal card with a butterfly, with some butterflies on it. It opens and you can journal in there, and that just slides right up here. And it has a little tuck spot there. And on this side we have a pocket, and inside of it is just a little index card with a little brad with some embellishment, a little butterfly, no, that's a flower, and a little tag and a little embellishment there. And that just slides down into this pocket like that. Some beautiful vintage, pink vintage lace. A little vintage book page that I made an envelope out of. A vintage photo. And I stained the back of it. And she just slides down into there. And a couple of those little cards that I printed out. And they just slide right down into there. Little embellishment here. Journal space there. Vintage lace. You can see the lines on this vintage statement paper. Vintage lace. Music paper. It's vintage, has a little bit of a patina to it. Vintage lace. A page from that vintage plant book. Turn this into a journal space here. Vintage fabric, and you can write on that as well for fun. And I just love the print on this. Isn't that just pretty? And some more of that vintage stationery. Has a little mushrooms and a little mouse and a bee and a worm, and they're just, and a little ladybug, and they're just having a little conversation. Look at the bluebells, beautiful. Some sheer fabric, a tea-dyed and crinkled index card, another little journal space, some vintage eyelet lace, a book page, Goodbye My Lady. I thought that was fitting for the last signature, and it has been tea-dyed blue with blueberries. I tea-dyed that with blueberries, and that's the color it came out. Some more vintage eyelet lace, another little journal space, the other side of that index card, and the sheer fabric, the other side of the vintage stationery. And look at the little bug here. She has a little apron on. Isn't she cute? And all the little flowers. I just love this vintage fabric. I love flowers. Don't you? And I love, love, love Shabby Chic. And you can journal on this side of the fabric. I also turned this vintage page into a journal spot with lines. More information on the plants from that vintage book. Vintage lace. The other side of the vintage music page. Vintage lace. Some more of that green and white lined statement paper. Beautiful dusky rose vintage lace. A pocket, and in this pocket we have some paper to make lists, and it's embellished with some music paper and some vintage book page cut into a flower, and that is tucked down into there. This little page from August, it's from 1997, but I thought it would make a cute little journaling spot, and that goes down in there. And then we have this little thing that I cut, picture that I've cut, and it says Lily's Pesky Plant, and I put that down into there. And that was the last signature. And in the back cover we have a pocket, And here we have another little picture of the little kittens with the mom and the 3 little kittens, and look at the beautiful flowers. And it says surroundings on this beautiful print and some vintage lace. And you can journal on the back of that. It does have some little glitter there. And that just fits right down into this little hand sewn pocket. And then I have one of my machine sewn little folded pockets. You can see the stitching all around. And inside of it I have included some vintage stationery parchment type paper that I have folded up to fit inside of there. And then this is just a little snippet from a calendar. I love the print. A little die cut butterfly. It says variety is the spice of life. And a little flower I cut out and a flat back pearl. And I just love the way that this was on that little spiral thing. I just love the way it looks. And this is the back side. Has some of the days of the week in 2017, but that's okay. And I like the way that it looks when it is tucked down inside here, just like this. And that just tucks down into there. And here I have some more paper. I love the patina of it. A little die cut butterfly and a little embellishment stapled onto it. You can open it up and journal on it as well. And it tucks down into there. And you can also see the beautiful slow stitching and the back cover with the beautiful slow stitching, the embroidered, hand embroidered lace, and the little vintage fabrics. And there you have it. That is the journal. It is 142 pages. And again, it is 8.5 inches long by 13 inches and 17 inches round. Let me pause for a minute. I'm back, and again it is 17 inches round. As you can see here, 17 inches. And it's quite fat. Let me clip this little bookmark back in, and I'm going to go and mend that one little spot that I needed to take care of, and take care of it. Let's see. And I mean, it's just so much fun. I mean, look at this. All that beautiful, beautiful fabric and the shabbiness of it, the vintage laces and trims and papers and book pages and die cuts and stamping and sewing and buttons and, I mean, paper clips, and it just goes on and on and on. And there is a lot of vintage ephemera in here that is original, not printed out, just straight from the book. And there's also some that is printed out from the internet. It's just full. There is, everywhere you look, there is interest. I mean, I find things that I have forgotten that I did, and it just amazes me. Even when you flip it upside down, look at the little button there, and it's just so much interest everywhere you look. It's just beautiful, beautiful to look at. And I just love it. And it ties closed with this ribbon. And again, I just absolutely love it. And when it's open, like it is now, it is 10 inches standing open. So that gives you an idea of how much stuff is in it, how big it is, and how beautiful it is. And I mean, just look at that, how gorgeous. And I love the little heart here with all the little snippets. And I was going to go back and add something here, but I mean, it's just, there's so much in it already. but I just don't think to add, I don't think it needs anything else. I think I'm going to have to call it quits with it. And I am going to go and post it for sale right now on eBay. So if you're interested, I will post a link to it in the description box and let me know. Thank you and have a good day and bye-bye.